Hi guys, and welcome to the first lecture of our channel. Since we don't believe in starting out easy here, we might as well take on one of the most important questions that you can ask yourself about the world. Is war inevitable? As in, is war avoidable? Or rather, is war an inherent part of human nature? Because that's the real question here, right? Is war somehow in the DNA of human societies? If you believe that we are hardwired for armed conflict, your answer to the bigger question is yes, war is inevitable. And if you believe that it's not really a part of us, then you might say, no, war is not inevitable. Let's look at both sides of the argument because there are scholars on either side who raise good points. And as with most videos on this channel, my objective is to give you a look at both sides so that you can form your own opinions rather than me just giving you a cookie cutter answer, right? So, on the side that says war is inevitable, the argument is obviously based on history. War as a practice is found in every culture, by every race, on every part of the world, right? You can sweep human history from the Western Hemisphere to the East, and you will find almost no practice taking place as systematically and frequently as warfare. From an evolutionary standpoint, this obviously makes sense since we're a primate species, and what we can discern from other primate creatures is that they do have conflict on a tribal level as well. In fact, this tendency of large groups fighting with each other is a recurring theme that we see in almost all social animals, including, by the way, pack animals like dogs and wolves. So some scholars say, come on, how much more obvious can it get? Of course, war is inevitable, just admit it. The fact that we've always fought wars with each other, the fact that similar behavior can be observed in the natural world, these are all signs that war is a part of us, it's a part of humanity. Probably the most famous and most quoted example of such thinkers is Thomas Hobbes, who stated in a famous work called The Leviathan that human beings were inherently selfish and pursued power. On the other side, there are many who refuse that notion as well. They claim that human civilization wouldn't be what it is today if people were inherently violent or if war was somehow a part of us. They also point out to the fact that many practices that were once widespread and considered inevitable among humanity have now been dented because of conscious action that was taken. Slavery, for instance, was once a practice so widespread around the world that nobody even bothered to consider the ethics of it. To most of our ancestors, that wasn't even a question that struck them as important. To them, it was just a part of the way the world worked. Slavery at one point was as natural as the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. And yet, in today's world, although certain forms of slavery still exist, the institution itself has been purged in most countries. Before slavery was abolished, anybody could have used the same argument that they do with war, that simply because every human society has practiced slavery, that makes slavery inevitable and a part of how we function. And that would have been wrong because successive generations did prove that age-old historical institutions like that can be dismantled on a somewhat global scale. You could also make the same argument with the rights of women. Women have historically been discriminated in essentially every society, but that didn't mean that it had to stay that way forever. That didn't mean that it was inevitable, because while the road ahead is still a long one, humanity has nonetheless managed to make huge strides when it comes to the protection of women. So point number A, is it really fair to assume that humans are inherently sort of selfish, considering the huge progress we've made protecting many different types of rights as with the passage of time? And point number B, can we really consider war to be inevitable simply because historically we've always managed to wage war against each other? This question is important not only because it's a philosophical point, but also because this determines the structure of the world order. So, for instance, if you look at our present world order, it's a system created by the winners of the Second World War with their liberal globalist values, one of which is that war can be avoided, that it can be prevented. The United Nations is the perfect example of this. Despite the failure of the League of Nations before it, the vision of the UN was always primarily to serve as a forum for discussion and compromise. If the founders of the present global order believed that war was inevitable, we would have never had the UN. Conversely, of course, you could argue that despite having the UN, the world still sees plenty of warfare. That while the larger nuclear powers might perhaps not be waging war against each other, that armed conflict is still rampant around the world when you look at non-state actors, when you look at smaller countries and insurgencies and things like that, which one could once again argue that is indication that war is inevitable, right? So, what makes topics like this cool is that everybody can have an opinion and that there is no right or wrong answer. As long as you can justify your perspective with facts and logic, you can go with whichever option you want. The cynics among us are more likely to suggest that warfare and waging war is a part of human nature, and the more optimistic ones among us would obviously say, no, nothing is inevitable, and progress can always be made to shatter through barriers, and that morality is something that will be subjective with each new generation. So tell us what you think, guys, in the comment section. Do you think humanity is destined to wage war against each other perpetually, or do you think that we can indeed rise above it? Because as I said earlier, for questions like this, there is no right or wrong answer. The answer is whatever you would like it to be. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll see you next time. Oh, by the way, please hit the like and subscribe button. Thank you.